Hello and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos, and happy Halloween, everyone. Today I thought it would be fun, since this is sort of my first year doing YouTube content, to talk about a YouTuber-made horror film that just came out, which is Shelby Oaks. So this is sort of going to be my movie review and, thoughts and criticisms. But that being said, I wanted to give a quick spoiler warning. If you have any interest in this movie, it's definitely the sort of movie I'd recommend going into without knowing anything about it. So I'm going to be spoiling, the whole plot for this review. So there's your warning to click off if you haven't seen it yet and you have interest. I do think it's worth checking out, and also if you can see it in theaters, I think it's a great experience in the theater with all the sound and the big screen and all of that. But that being said, I think we can jump right into it. All right, so to sort of go over a scorecard for this, for the acting, I'm gonna give this one I think sort of a B. I felt like there was a lot of good acting in it, and in the beginning when everyone was sort of doing it as a documentary style, I felt like the acting leaned into that. Here's the thing, at times I felt like the main actress who was portraying Mia, I thought she did a really good job. There were some times where she had tons of emotion on her face and strain and stress and all that, but there were also some moments where I felt like her acting just felt kind of flat and unbelievable. So ultimately I felt like it was sort of inconsistent. That being said, the acting of Riley was really well done, and the character at the end, who I'm going to call sort of like the witch in the woods, I thought she did a phenomenal job as being sort of like unnerving and creepy and all of that. But yeah, ultimately a little inconsistent. As for the cinematography, I thought it was really good. I'm going to give it an A for that. The only thing is, the cinematography was really good in my opinion, and the cameras felt like they were expensive, and so the shots were very clear, and especially again when it was sort of edited as being like a documentary, was great. I did feel like sometimes it almost felt like the camera budget and directing style in that sense was almost of a higher budget than the acting, so sometimes there's this weird sort of dissonance between the actor's performance, where it felt like it would be in a low budget indie film, and then and also, to be fair, this movie actually had a pretty low budget. I'm pretty sure, I may be totally wrong on this, don't quote me, but I think I saw it was only something like $3 million or something. But yeah, anyway, I just felt like there were some weird moments or some of the props and whatnot, and this sort of CGI demon-y stuff, sometimes that looked a little bit more low budget than sort of sometimes the directorial style, if that makes sense. But I thought it was great. There was a couple shots in particular that I thought were really well done. One had to do with all of the paranormal paranoids content, where it sort of has an old YouTube effect and an old vibe like that. That was done super well, and it's also really well done on sort of the internet unfiction ARG project that was done to promote this. That was all really well done. But yeah, and then the other sort of moment I really enjoyed was when Mia is going to this sort of cultist demon worshiper's house, and the old lady's face is like totally shrouded in darkness. I thought that was phenomenal and like really creepy and nightmarish-y. It felt like you were in a bad nightmare. Soundtrack, I thought it was fine. Not much stood out. I will say, I know the song that Riley sings was originally for the ARG, so it was sort of supposed to be a bit of a code / reveal of there being more plot there or whatever, but it is kind of goofy in the context of the movie, only because it's it's so on the nose. She's literally saying like, big sister, I'm haunted, come find me, things like that. So, you know, it's all right though. I'll give it a B. Story, okay, here's what's rough. I'll get more into my thoughts on the story later, so I won't discuss it much here, but I'm going to give it a C+. Scariness, I didn't feel like there were a ton of moments where I was so you know, like when you're watching a really scary movie and you almost feel like you need to pause it or turn it off, even though it's just a movie, and you kind of lose your sort of suspension of disbelief and all that. I didn't really have anything like that here, but there were some moments that, you know, creeped me out, like the woman's face being shrouded in shadow, and there's a scene where a man how do I say this for YouTube? A man uses a gun in a way early on in the movie that's scary. And there's also a pretty creepy scene where Mia is watching these tapes of how her sister's friends were all brutally, you know, killed in the woods in this cabin, and then the screen goes black, and in the reflection of the TV you see, you know, what appears to be a terrifying being watching her, and I thought that was really well done and a good sort of jump scare in that way. And I also feel like all the jump scares, you know, there were jump scares, but I didn't feel like they were very cheap, so I'm gonna give it, you know, sort of a B there, maybe a B-, because again, it's not like terrifying. But I will say it's important to sort of mention that when I go into a horror movie, I don't always need it to be terrifying or super scary to be a good horror movie. Some of my favorite horror movies have less to do with it being scary and more to do with it just being like very interesting. If it's like a compelling paranormal story or, you know, something like that, if it's intriguing enough, I enjoy the movie even if it's not terrifying for me. That being said, I want to get into some of my more like in-depth thoughts. Okay, so something else I wanted to mention before I forget it is in terms of the sort of camera work, direction, style, all of that. I thought something that they did really well is they would do these long shots of something, and you got the impression that something was, you know, you were supposed to be seeing something, but you couldn't figure it out, or you were rushing to figure it out in time. And I felt like they did a good job of not making whatever creepy thing you're supposed to be seeing obvious enough, so it sort of makes you lean forward and like you're really scanning the image or scanning the shot of the woods or whatever, looking for whatever terrifying thing might be there. And I thought that was really well done because it was very immersive in the way of if you were walking in the woods and suddenly you heard a sound, you know, far off to your left, so you turn and you're scanning the woods looking to see if there's anyone there, or is it just a squirrel, or what is it? I thought it did a really good job with that, so just wanted to mention that before I get into the story. Okay, so as for the story, I have sort of a weird relationship with the story of this movie. So I have so much to talk about with this. So for starters, I guess to address the elephant in the room, a lot of people are not happy with the ending of this movie. And part of why I have a weird relationship with this is I totally misunderstood the ending of the movie. And so when I left the theater, I thought the ending of the movie was great. I thought it was, you know, not phenomenal, but I thought it was a really interesting thing. So here's what I thought. So you get this story. There's these two sisters. There's Mia and there's Riley, and they're growing up, and Riley seems to be getting all of the paranormal activity. She sees stuff, has weird dreams, etc. One day Mia goes into her bedroom and, you know, to try to comfort Riley, and she also sees the incubus demon. She doesn't know what it is. She just sees a scary thing there, and she thinks it's just a bad dream and writes it off. But it's not until years later that Riley goes missing that Mia then remembers this, and she brings it up to her husband, and her husband just brushes it off. And the whole thing with Mia is that she really wants a child, and, you know, her and her husband are having marital problems because they don't have a baby. But at the same time, I don't feel like her want for a baby is brought up as like that is all she wants as a character. What she wants more than anything is to find her sister Riley, and that's like what is driving her obsessively. So then she gets to this sort of witch's woods in the house, and she finds Riley, and, you know, that's sort of like the big climax. But Riley, right as they're about to escape, runs upstairs to go confront the witch and potentially basically kill this baby that was born out of assault and, you know, occult ritual, let's say. So she does that, and Mia kind of tries to stop her, at first just being like, we have to escape, but then, you know, Riley's literally lifted up off the ground, thrown to the ground, and then Mia runs up to help Riley. But while this witch is doing this whole ritual, and we see that Riley almost stops the ritual because then the witch has to start over from scratch, but while Riley is like knocked out from being thrown, Mia does nothing to stop it. She just sort of watches it happen, watches this witch cut herself open and then smear her blood on pictures of Mia and this whole heart that's drawn in the woods and all of this stuff. And then the witch dies due to her wounds, and, you know, but gives this sort of like her eyes turn into sort of demon eyes and all of this. And then Mia gets up and looks at the baby, and instead of, you know, being like, oh wow, this baby was just part of this creepy ritual and I just saw my sister literally levitate, so I know there is some substance to these stories of you know, demons and devils and all of that. Instead, she just seems to be sort of uncannily you know, overwhelmed with like, oh wow, it's a cute baby, you're so perfect. And then it just jump cuts to Riley's in the hospital, the baby's in the hospital, they're, you know, running their checkups and all of that, and then both are brought home to Mia. Mia's talking to the documentary crew from earlier in the movie, and, you know, she's like, oh yeah, Riley, you know, it's only day one, I think I'm seeing some improvement, but we've got a long road. And then they're like, well, what about the baby? And suddenly Mia's whole face changes, and she's beaming and she's gushing about how it's a perfect baby, and, you know, all this stuff about how, you know, it's perfect and she loves it, and she's, you know, she's clearly like ecstatic about having this baby. Then she goes outside to let the documentary crew out, and Riley gets up and realizes that she needs to basically end this baby because it, you know, was part of this cult ritual and maybe like in a reincarnation of a demon or something like that. Mia tries to stop her and ultimately knocks Riley out of the window, and Riley falls to the ground and then is devoured by like demon dogs. And Mia is left with the baby. And then we see that this demon is behind her and wraps his, you know, is wrapping his hand over her shoulder. But while this is happening, Mia is monologuing about how, well, maybe the incubus wasn't just following Riley or something like that. And she basically says, like, maybe he looked into the window and then realized he saw what he wants. And it shows a flashback to the scene when it's the two girls. And we see that Riley is fast asleep, and it's Mia who gets up and walks over towards the window. And so this is where my great misunderstanding happens. I was like, oh, this ending kind of sucks. I don't really like that. You know, the witch dies and they just go to the hospital, and Mia's being weird about this baby. That's kind of weird because, again, she was all about Riley and also just saw that this baby was born out of like so much trauma and assault and stuff that you would think she would have sort of a more reserved, you know, reaction to the baby and whatnot. But then so I'm like, oh, that kind of sucks. But then I see this ending and I think to myself, oh my God, when she was a child, did she go to the window and like make a deal with this devil to one day have a kid, and that's why she's having problems with her husband having a kid, and that's why Riley was kidnapped, because it's sort of like, instead of selling her soul, she accidentally sold Riley, not knowing as a kid the implications of what she was doing. And is that why she's so uncannily weird with the baby? Because maybe she realized, oh, this baby is basically the product of my deal with the devil I made. I remember now. And so she's overcome with love because she realizes this baby is mine, and like, it's meant for me because I made that deal. This is basically the end result of that contract. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's like a super dark twist, but it sort of explains why Mia made such weird choices when she was in the witch's house. And it's sort of just like and then there's, the song at the end credits where Riley is singing, oh, big sister, come find me. And then the end, after the credits, you see a tape where I believe it's like Mia is singing sort of like a lullaby to Riley, and she's saying she would never betray her and all of this. And I'm like, oh, but she did betray her. She made this deal, and whether she knew that the devil would take Riley as a result of the deal or not is ambiguous. Very interesting. Here's the thing, that is a complete misunderstanding of the ending. That's not what happens at all, because one, incubus demons don't make deals like the devil makes deal with mortals, and it also had some plot holes with it where it was like, why would a little girl make a deal with the devil for something that most little girls think is sort of guaranteed? I feel like, a little girl wouldn't be thinking, what if I'm infertile one day and I can't have a kid? You're thinking, she's thinking, oh, so that seemed like a weird deal to make. Because she doesn't make that deal. The real plot is that the incubus is sort of stalking Riley, and then one day sees Mia and realizes, oh, I don't really want Riley, I want Mia. But since Mia is infertile, I'm going to use Riley to have my kid, and then I'm going to make Mia raise it. Which is really dark for starters, but also just sort of like a much lamer ending, in my opinion, because it sort of makes it feel like, with my sort of fan theory ending, there was much more of a sort of cause and effect, like, one day as a child, Mia made this mistake of making a deal with this, shadowy demon. And ever since then, she's been dealing with the effects and the outcomes and the consequences of that. And all of the plot of this is, the consequences of that. However, it's not really that. It's more just, one day these two girls just happened to have been seen by, a demon who was basically prowling in the area, and then just bad things happen. So it just felt sort of, it was, especially since I had thought genuinely that my interpretation of the ending just was the ending, and I really liked it. So on the one hand, I have this weird relationship where I keep thinking the movie had a better ending than it did because I liked my sort of wrong ending. And then I have to remember that since it's not my ending, it's kind of a bad ending. So that's all my discussion about the ending. I also want to say, though, I feel like, basically justice for Riley, it felt really cruel as a movie that all of this horrible stuff happens to Riley, and she never gets sort of her ending victory. I thought maybe in the end it would end with this weird twist where she does end the baby while Mia's outside, but by doing so she breaks the curse and defeats the incubus, because what the incubus wants is for that baby to be around, and all of that stuff. So I thought she would at least get that, but she didn't. The fact that she has, she's assaulted for like, I think 12 years, all of her friends are killed, and then in the end she's thrown out a window where I think it's implied that like her back breaks, and so she can't move her arms and legs, and then she's mauled to death and torn apart by 3 hellhounds. That just felt like way too cruel to do to a character, especially because, to give some sort of context, Riley is sort of the main protagonist of this ARG that was done way back in like 2022, I want to say. And in that, Riley was seen as like sort of the protagonist, you could say, because it's this whole, there was this group of YouTubers who were paranormal investigators, and they go missing, and so it's this mystery of what happened to them, and a lot of the focus is on Riley. So going into the movie, I sort of already had an emotional connection to Riley since I knew her via the ARG. And I was excited to see what happens to her. And yeah, she just gets such a, she's dealt such a bad hand that it just feels almost needlessly cruel. And yeah, so that needed to be said. But that being said, there's one other big point I want to bring up about the story. So, full disclosure, I don't actually know anything about the writing process of this for Chris Stuckman. I don't know if so. This is all just total, conjecture and theory and whatnot. But I feel from a writing perspective that there may be some substance to this. But I'm totally willing to admit that I'm wrong. Again, it's not like I read an interview and I'm using this, but I feel like this movie has two stories. So there's the story of the paranormal paranoids, and then there's the story of Mia. And I genuinely feel like these are two separate movies, and they got blended together, and as a result, both are unsatisfying. Because Mia's story is sort of distracted by the interesting aura of the paranormal paranoids, and the paranormal paranoids' mystery gets cheapened because they don't have enough runtime to deal with it, because it's Mia's story. So Mia's story is, a sister looks for, her missing sister, and discovers that she's been kidnapped by cultists. That alone is enough substance for an entire horror movie and a whole 1 hour and a half plot line. That's basically like Taken but paranormal, and all sorts of stuff. The paranormal paranoids plot is, YouTube ghost hunters go missing. And it's sort of this whole mystery of them as a group. Because when you make it the Mia plot, you're forced to really only focus on Riley, when honestly the entire group was compelling. And for the paranormal paranoids, I went into this movie knowing about them and knowing about that ARG, and so I was really intrigued to see more of their mystery. And I really wanted this to be more like a Silent Hill vibe, because you also have with Shelby Oaks sort of, it feels like Silent Hill, where it's this old abandoned town that's mysterious and kind of has a weird aura to it. And I wanted their mystery to feel a bit more like ethereal, where, if it was that these ghost hunters then go to an abandoned town and they go missing, I almost wanted it to be like when they stepped into the town, they stepped into a different, plane of existence, and this one's all foggy and, very Silent Hill-esque, and they have to find their ways out or something. I didn't want it to be that they were just killed by a guy who was a cultist and may or may not have been, possessed. Because with them, that just kind of feels like a letdown of you build up this mystery of whatever happened to these ghost hunters and these old YouTubers, and you have old footage that has this eerie but nostalgic feeling to it, and then if you just find out that just some guy killed them, it's super disappointing, and especially all the more disappointing that it's just that one guy and his mom as cultists, and that's it. It's not even like a cool large shadow organization, but I really wanted it to just be this much more eerie, like they vanished off the face of the earth. And in that plot it could have been cool to see someone somehow bring them back to our dimension, and there's this sort of eeriness to the paranormal paranoids, and no time has passed, so they're still dressed in clothes and everything that are relevant 12 years ago, but they're now in this whole new world. And I don't know, I wanted that to be a much more like ethereal, not fully answered plot, a bit Lovecraftian, a bit sort of just unknown. And then the Mia plot totally works, where it could be sister then starts kicking the ass of cultists to save her sister, and all of those issues. Because also Riley as a character reminds me a lot of Laura Palmer. And I won't get too heavily into spoilers, but that's a character from Twin Peaks, where the story starts that Laura Palmer, who's this homecoming queen, has gotten murdered, and so it's a murder mystery of who did it. But there's instantly this captivating, strange aura around Laura. She doesn't seem like she's, it seems like everyone has a different story about her, and there's all this mystery, and there's these old tapes of her where she seems to almost have this sort of a knowingness in her eyes, and it's very intriguing. And Riley felt sort of similar to that when it was the ARG, and sort of the first, beginning fourth of the movie, when it's this sort of fake documentary. I also totally would have been satisfied with the Paranormal Paranoid's entire story being in a movie that's a mockumentary, a fake documentary. And so, because those ones, you don't have to see all of the action and stuff. It could have just been a documentary crew is trying to investigate this strange disappearance, and they may never fully solve it. They don't have to save the paranormal paranoids. They just document this strange occurrence. And at most, when you're done watching it, you could have some fan theories of what you think might have happened. And I think leaving that mystery open would have, really helped this plot. And then again, the Mia plot, as a result, just feels lamer in comparison to all that was sort of going on with the paranormal paranoids, because this one is just sister looks for missing sister, finds that she's been kidnapped, and they run away together. As a result, I didn't really find Mia to be that compelling. But yeah, I just feel like so my sort of fan theory is that I kind of think Chris might have started with the Mia plot, and he was like, well, who's the missing sister? And then eventually was like, ooh, what if she was like a YouTuber and was like a paranormal investigating YouTuber or something? And then to sort of promote the movie / secure funding to make this plot, he then made the ARG about this plot, but accidentally, this plot ended up being a lot more interesting and intriguing than the original one, but they have to be blended together as a result, which is how you get Shelby Oaks, which is ultimately a bit disappointing. So I kind of feel like that's basically covers all the thoughts that I really wanted to rant about with this movie. So I'm going to wrap that up here. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys all have a great Halloween. I'll be seeing you again shortly, although I won't be in this costume anymore. We'll be going back to the normal design. So with that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.